What was it like working with Pat Broeker in the Sea Org in the 1970s? How about L. Ron Hubbard giving him a cash bonus that he didn't request, but he certainly did enjoy? We've got more stories from Mike Goldstein from his time on the Flagship Apollo handling the money for Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, Mary Sue Hubbard, etc. Stay tuned. I think you're going to enjoy it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher. I'm here with Janice Gillum-Grady. How you doing today, Janice?
G'day, Mark. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm fine. We're getting hot weather here, which is kind of nice, but it's a little different than what we've had. But anyway, I'm happy because it's not cold anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's nice outside. It's nice and warm. I sat out, got a little sun this morning, so it's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna carry on with our guest that we've had recently, who's been very popular. And why don't you go ahead and introduce him, and I'll bring him on.
Yep. Well, easy to introduce. Mike Goldstein, or also known as Golds.
Hello, Mike. Aloha.
Hey, Mike.
Aloha. Yeah, we got the color or not the color, the attire coordination. We're all Hawaiian today.
Yeah, we're all Hawaiian, so
right.
We gotta go. well, like your first Sea Org mission to Hawaii, we should all just go back to Hawaii and enjoy it.
That would be.
It's funny too.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say it's funny too. I thought about that. Sometimes we tell stories about, oh yeah, I went to Denmark or I went to Hawaii or whatever. And what people don't realize is that when we would go on mission, we barely left the org to go to the airport. You know what I mean? There was no like sightseeing or scurrying around or anything. I remember I went to Denmark once and I went on the way to the airport. I went, oh, let's go see that Little Mermaid statue in the Copenhagen harbor. And when I got there, it was like this puny little thing. I went, that's it?
I've never been to Denmark. I've always wanted to go to see that mermaid.
Right? Am I right, Mike? Did you ever go see it?
Yeah. No, I didn't. I was in Denmark a year and I never saw the mermaid.
Okay, well, the only reason I say that is because we're used to like Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, it was big, little. It's small.
And I go, it's like it's small. It's smaller than statues you see around a museum. Yeah. They're really funny.
Yeah, but that's
anyway,
true. That's true. You never go and see anything except the airport to the org, and then back.
I saw a restaurant. I went to a Denny's while I was there. That was it.
Yeah.
Airport, org, Denny's. That was it.
Yeah. Or even when you went to Clearwater, you didn't go to the beach.
No, but I did like when Hubbard put it in where when you finish your mission, you wait 24 hours, leave the org for 24 hours, and then come back and just make sure everything's okay. So I did. When I was in LA at AOLA on mission, I had 24 hours off, and I saw the movie Jaws. And I saw sharks in every swimming pool after that.
Well, the one I just remembered the one time that I was on mission that I had a layover. This was Janice. This is when Paul, your husband, ran me on the mission to shut down all the RTC offices around the world. So literally me and a girl named Tori Shell, we went from LA to Toronto to St. Hill to Copenhagen. And then we went from Copenhagen all the way to Sydney, Australia. And we had a layover in Singapore of about 12 hours. And we got in at like 6 a.m. So we did take a taxi into town in Singapore and go looking around and shopping and stuff because there was nothing else we could do. So we went ahead on our own dime and did that, and then got on the plane and flew on to Sydney. That's the only time I remember ever doing anything.
Smart move.
Yeah, and then the worst part is when I got to Mexico City, because then we went to Mexico City, is when I was on my way back, I had my briefcase and my camera was in there with all my photo roll, my film rolls, and I put my briefcase down. I didn't have any Scientology or money in there. Put my briefcase down when I was checking into the flight. And then when I went back down, my briefcase was gone. I lost all those photos. I never got them back.
Mm.
Anyway, serves me right for taking time off and goofing around.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's your motivator.
There you go. Anyway, where we left off, Mike, you were back on the Apollo, having been put on the DPF, the Deck Project Force, and then Mary Sue, who was in charge. Hubbard wasn't there, and she put you back on as a flag banking officer, and that's where we left off on part 2. And so we thought we will carry on from here because you've got some more great stories.
Okay. I wasn't on very long on the DPF. That was pretty much, I believe, Herbie Parkhouse's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Was, he needs to get some rest and relaxation. That's how he got me out of Europe. And so I end up back on the DPF, but Mary Sue knew. So I was only there for a week. And then she put me back on that post.
But the DPF is relaxation?
What? That's what compared to the RPF, I think it was.
Yeah, we didn't have the RPF yet, but
yeah. Very soon though. We were going to get it soon.
Yeah, a few months later.
Just a few months. That's right. And at that point, I just went back on that post. My office wasn't in the same place. I was down in the Treasury office now. Where there was this, in the back of the Treasury office, there was a huge machine. I don't know what it did. I don't know. It was dead. It didn't do anything. They just put a Formica tabletop on it, and that was my desk.
It was probably the old Adresso machine.
No, it was some kind of a ship machine.
A ship machine.
Something like that, big thing under, I don't know. Because I remember when white gloves, people would stick their hands in there, come out with grease. I'd have to clean in there this stupid thing for as far as the person could reach so I could pass the stupid white glove inspection. But yeah, I don't know what it was. Nobody ever said. But anyway,
that reminds me, Mike. Did they have I had to have safes on the ship, right? Where were the safes?
Well, yeah. There were 2 safes. There was the Treasury safe and there was mine, and they were both in the Treasury office.
Yeah, and then LRH had a safe in his cabin.
That one I didn't know.
But, yeah.
But that's where you had your $1 million in cash.
In the back of the Treasury. Right. I pulled out for that picture. I put it on a table there in the Treasury office.
Yeah.
You remember in the tween decks?
Yeah, the forward tween decks, there was Treasury was built. It was all plywood, and it was right near the forward hold 1, and it was above hold 2. Oh no, it was above hold 2. That's where it was.
Okay. Yeah. I think so.
Because you had to go to the forward hold, you had to go past that in the tween decks and the up through the hold to get to the forward well deck. But yeah, so you were right aft of hold number 2 and sitting above the lower hold where the classroom was.
Right. You would take this right by there. You take the stairs down to the classroom.
Yep.
From the twin decks. That's right. Yeah. So that's where I was at that time, and I just figured, okay. Now I just want to get Rebecca to flag, because when I was in Europe before I left, she made arrangements to find a replacement, and she found another Class 8 who also was bilingual in French. So she found a perfect replacement, and that was all set up. And she was supposed to follow me within like a week. So, and that was all agreed upon by the CO there. Nan Starkey was the CO.
Oh, sure. I remember Nan.
And Owen was her husband. Owen was the org officer.
Right.
And so I had their agreement. Everything was set up. So when on the way that I'm coming back, somebody else is going there to remove Nan on mission. And so when I get back, they remove her and they say, Rebecca can't go. This woman, I don't remember the name of this other person, but she wasn't Sea Org.
The missionary?
No, her replacement was not a Sea Org.
Okay.
The auditor.
Yeah, the auditor who's going to replace her. Oh, she's not a Sea Org member, so she won't join the Sea Org. So no, you need a different replacement. There's nobody else. So they just refused to let her go. So I go to the recruitment, flag recruit, PPO, whatever, the flag recruitment officer, whoever is, and I talked to her, and and she basically told me that if Rebecca doesn't get the flag, it's because she's not flag people. That's what she told me. So by this time, I am so upset, and I just write up to Mary Sue, and I tell her, this is what happened, and this is what she told me. And I don't know, it wasn't very long, but Nikki, her communicator, comes down to the office and says, Mary Sue wants, did she really tell you this? Is that what she said? I go, yeah. So she says, wait here. And her office was like right outside mine in another little built area. And she just reamed her out. Get Rebecca to Goldstein the flag within 24 hours or your head. Oh, this just screamed at her.
Oh, that you're talking about the recruitment officer. She yelled at.
Yeah. Nikki yelled at her. Oh, yeah. She just, get her here. You got 24 hours. So Rebecca was there in 24 hours. And so then, that was great. That took my attention off that. And then we decided to get married there on the ship. Again, we were married in a courtroom in Denmark. And so now we were going to have, we had another wedding on the ship, which was really nice. Yeah, that's it. That's right.
Everyone loved weddings.
Oh, yeah, it was a lot of fun. The guy on the far right, that's Frank Giltman, and he was a mission holder, and not too many mission holders were allowed to come to the ship in those days. I remember him and a guy named J.C. Hughes.
Yep, from San Diego.
Right. I don't remember too many more that were allowed to come.
No, and Frank was New York mission on west side at Central Park.
Uh-huh.
Right. Frank and Helen Geltman.
Helen Geltman.
And Frank used to send us Cake Master cheesecake from New York.
That's right.
What a nice guy. He was such a nice guy. He would
pack it in dry ice and ship it off to us, and we'd all get this great cheesecake.
God. And that's Lizzie Gablehouse.
In the middle
Can you
there.
go left to right? Can you go left to right? That way people can follow.
Oh, okay. Left to right. Well, that's was the captain for a very brief period, Dusty Rhodes.
On the left.
He was a captain of the ship until Captain Bill got back, but he was not there very long. Nice guy. And then Janet, I can't remember, Thompson.
And people knew her as Janet Whalen. She married Kurt Whalen.
Oh, okay. Good. And, of course, Neil Sephardi.
Yep.
And I'd known Neil since I first joined. He was on the Boulevard when I first joined New York.
And he was with Captain Bill chasing psychos around L.A.
Oh, he did that later?
Yeah, he's got some stories on that. He's going to come on this channel.
You put me back in touch with Neil. I hadn't talked to Neil since I left the ship. And so
I just saw him 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we saw him in Tampa.
Yeah, we've been going back and forth. It's been great,
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the main wedding party there.
And then Liz Gablehouse is next to you, right?
Yes, and that's Lizzie. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And she and Rebecca were old friends.
Right.
So she was the.
Yeah, you know what? She and Rebecca actually, Lizzie the first time she went to St. Hill, they went there looking for Amos because Nate had gotten Amos into Scientology and the family was looking for Amos. And Lizzie and Emily Becker went to England and met Bob Young, and they all went down to St. Hill. Bob was not in Scientology, and they went to St. Hill. None of them were in Scientology. They're looking for Amos, and that's where she met Rebecca and became great friends from there on.
I didn't remember all. Yeah, they found Amos finally. I hadn't met Amos until much later. I knew Nate before I ever met Rebecca. He was the flag rep in L.A. when I was the FBO.
Right.
And he was with Jan Barthol.
Oh, yeah.
Remember him? Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, they were at St. Hill during the days when the briefing course was packed with students, and the students had to go find PCs to deliver the grades to, and so all of them became PCs and got their grades knowing nothing about Scientology.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. They just,
Wh-
that was
let me
when,
ask
like late 60s, right?
Yeah, in the 60s.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question? So you mentioned that people liked weddings. Like, when would they have weddings? In the evening, or like on a day off, or how did it go on the ship when they had weddings?
I think it was you pick a day and announce it, and everyone just showed up.
Well, I remember before I went to Europe, there was there was a time when LRH posted in the Ooze this thing called Sadie Hawkins.
Yeah.
Remember Sadie? And he wanted, because you had all these people that were, he didn't want anybody having
Shacking up.
sex. Yeah, they weren't shacking up. So he did a Sadie Hawkins. Any girl that can find a guy gets a promotion in rank. So all these people were getting married. And every night there was a different wedding. You go in there and you drink beer. It was great. But most of these weddings didn't last. I remember one of them was Nikki Friedman. I don't know. Yeah, Nikki. Yeah, it was Nikki Friedman anyway. So Nikki married a guy by the name of Dave Englehart, who was just this. He was
Sure. I know Dave. Yeah.
And he married. I think they were together. What, about a week?
Yeah, Nikki went through many husbands.
I
But
know.
yeah, that was February 72 when he did that. And yeah, all these women got promotions for managing to get a husband. And it definitely handled the problem of people just shacking up.
Yeah,
That's a
It
funny
calmed
story.
that down.
Sadie Hawkins.
Funny.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, here's some more pictures from the wedding. Go ahead. Who's who?
That's Diana, and then that's Mary Sue right there.
You mean that thing that looks like the thing from Addams Family? That long red hair? That's Diana.
Yeah. She had this. She used to wear this like green velvet coat, and that's what she was wearing, like a green velvet coat. And that other girl, I forget her name. She was in the household unit.
Vicky Berman, that was Mary Sue Stewart.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mary Sue's cut off in that picture.
Yeah, she is. And there's Nikki.
Oh, she is. Yeah, she's
Yeah,
not there.
yeah.
Oh, wait, that is Mary. I see Mary Sue's on the outline on the left.
She's on the very, yeah.
Yeah, and then that's Vicky, and then Lizzie, then Diana, then Rebecca, and then Golds.
Yeah, and there's her communicator, Nikki. That's the one we were talking about. She's just trying to figure out who she's going to marry next.
Okay. That's it. She's going to catch the bouquet again, and it's like, I guess I got to get married again.
Now look who caught the bouquets. The next one, the next picture. Oh no, the one you had one before that with Robin Roos.
Oh, that one. Yeah, hold on.
There, Robin.
Yeah, that's Robin, and that's Janet again, and then there's Barry Watson.
Yep, behind Janet.
Behind Janet. Yeah.
Now let me ask you about Robin Roos. Was she related to Otto Roos, or was she married to him, or what was? How did she have Roos at the end of her name?
She had been married to Otto, but it didn't last long.
She kept the name though. I remember her in Clearwater years later.
She kept the name, and she was CS3 Treasury, and at another point she was CS2 over dissemination.
That's when I knew her. She was CS2.
Yeah, she's apparently after Hurricane Andrew, she'd left the Sea Org, and Hurricane Andrew wiped out everything, and she rejoined the Sea Org back in Clearwater. And now she's out again, but she's still in good standing, lives in Clearwater and Melbourne because she's Australian, but she's still around.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
And that's
anybody in this photo?
The woman that you see kind of smiling over next to Dusty Rhodes, that's Fran Broeker.
Oh, okay.
Fran Friedman, Fran Harris.
Fran, right. Broeker, Friedman, Harris, right.
Yeah.
And that's from this. I don't know who the guy with the sideburn is.
Brian.
Who is that?
Brian Charlton.
Oh, okay. I don't remember. And then Frank, and then that's Pat Broeker there.
Right.
Shirt. Yeah.
And then Louise Schechter.
Right. That's right. Yeah,
And Pat worked with you. He worked with you in the Treasury area, or what?
No, when I joined the finance office, he was
Right.
at the Continental Finance Office in the U.S. He was the org officer, and I mean, I always liked Pat in those days. You know, he was a very likable guy, and I don't remember him doing too much. That's the thing out there. He was great at like supervising people. I don't know if he actually. I never remember him producing much, but he could sure tell stories. And his favorite was The Dirty Dozen. You'd hear the whole movie. The whole, you know, we'd be working at some project, and he'd be there just telling stories. You know.
He was a great socializer.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Mike, you mentioned, I think earlier, I'm not sure on the video or not, but Pat and Annie came back to Clearwater in like 79, I guess, 78, 79, something like that, when Annie had to be the CEO of the Commerce Messenger Org in Clearwater. Pat came and he was SUL, Special Unit Liaison. That was basically his title. And that's when I met him, and I dealt with him because I was the LRH Com for Estates at the time. And all of a sudden, Pat's like saying, how much money do you need to redo all the rooms in the Fort Harrison Hotel? And how about for the galley and this and that? And Mick Davies, who was the CEO, and I, you know, we put together this list and we give it to Pat, and Pat goes, no, this is not enough, you know. And so he keep encouraging us to make it more and more and more. And then he got us the money to do all this stuff. You know what I mean? So I always loved Pat. He was great. And like you said, he was a great storyteller. He was really easy to deal with. But that's what he did for us as far as that time period. And then, of course, I didn't see him again until I went up to the Gold Base, and he was on the run with Hubbard. And one time I ran into him in DM, you know, David Miscavige at one of the secret locations in San Bernardino, because Miscavige needed a box of stuff brought to him, and there was Pat in a long beard, incognito. But I always liked him and got along with him. But he liked to talk, that's for sure.
Yeah, like he could do. I was very surprised when I found out what the position he had. You know, it really shocked me. But
Janice, anyway. he wouldn't have had that position though if he wasn't married to Annie, right?
No.
Right.
Am I right,
Janice?
Well,
he got himself into the LRH PR office when we were on the ship. So when HRH, Hubbard's father, came to the ship, he got to meet him and work with him. But Wally mostly dealt with HRH. But when we were ashore and HRH passed away, Pat was still in PR. So Pat went to Montana and handled all of LRH's estate on his behalf because he knew the dad. And that's how he worked closely with Hubbard on that. And then he was still in PR, and then he managed to marry a messenger. Well, actually, he hadn't married Annie yet. He managed to get in with Hubbard by going to Sparks when Claire and Dee Dee and Pat went.
Which we've told that story on a separate episode, yeah.
Yeah, but Pat was the one who kind of knew the outside world where Dee Dee and Claire did not. And Pat was a smoozer. So when he married Annie, it was all decided, well, the best people to go with Hubbard if he has to leave would be a married couple, and that was Pat and Annie. They didn't go because Annie had some special job or anything like that. She didn't. But it was because they were a married couple.
Now, Janice, how did Pat and Annie get together and when? Was that a W?
Yeah, that was a W after Pat came back after Pat came back from Sparks with Claire and Dee Dee and Hubbard. He started hanging out with with Annie, and Annie had just divorced Charlie. Pat was still married to Trudy. But Trudy was in the RPF at Flag and couldn't get up to Int or into La Quinta. So Pat, at that point, I was going to Flag for my mom's funeral. And Pat asked me to take some papers to Trudy to get her to sign. That's when I found out they were the divorce papers. So while I was in Clearwater for 3 days, I saw Trudy in the RPF and asked her to sign the papers for Pat, which she did. And then she left shortly afterwards.
Let me ask you, okay, you mentioned that Annie and Charlie Rush, they were married for a while, and then they got divorced. divorce didn't happen very often when I was in New York. Why did they get divorced? Was there some reason for it or some
Well,
problem?
when your husband sleeps around on you, you normally
Is
divorce
that
him.
what happened with Charlie? Okay.
Yeah, he messed around with an Adderall student while Annie was away at La Quinta.
Oh, okay. Got it. And so that was the end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't remember people getting divorced until David Miscavige started ordering it after we left, ordering people that they had to get divorced.
Normally you were sent to the chaplain to get a chaplain's handling to resolve the marriage and figure out what the problem is and keep the couple together. But when there's a third party involved in that marriage, that's when there have become divorces.
Yeah. And then, of course, if one spouse left Scientology or the Sea Org, then you had to get divorced. Like that's what happened to me. So.
Right.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Back to the story. I think I showed all the wedding photos.
I never knew a lot of that. That's great.
That's it. So, all right. So
you got married on the ship. You don't know.
So you got married on the ship. Who was the minister? Was it Mary Sue? Obviously was there, but she wasn't the minister, right?
No, Dusty Rhodes was the captain.
Dusty Rhodes, got it.
He did, yeah. He's the captain of the ship.
Yeah.
And
you were in Lisbon at the time?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Don't remember really well, but we were there. There or Spain, I don't remember.
Right.
Maybe we got to Spain a little bit later. I'm not sure, but I figured at that point, Rebecca would be, of course, put in qual or something or in tech, and she wasn't. LRH was putting together the Programs Bureau, and what a fiasco. Anyway, he appointed her. He appointed her as the programs chief for AOS HDK. It was on. I was there. I couldn't believe it. This person that would, on a tech post, he puts her in the programs bureau for the one reason that she'd come from AOS HDK. So now she's going to be in the programs bureau and evaluate. And
hey, you know what? You've done many lifetime jobs in your lifetime, so you can do this one.
Yeah, well, that programs bureau is. He put people in there. That was like one of the biggest messes I ever saw, and it was, and it was a thing at that time. It really shocked me how that thing was running, and that every single person in that programs bureau went to the RPF. Everyone. So there was no more programs bureau, but of course it didn't have anything to do with LRH. That was the thing. It was all them.
Now, I
remember that at that time. It was like I just shake my head, see these guys going, and it was anyway. She was in that programs bureau, which was kind of a nightmare for her. And anyway, I'm still on this FBO post, right? And eventually, I'm trying to think. Wait a minute. Before she was put on that, she was put in qual for a while. She was in qual for a little while before he started the programs bureau. Now that I remember. Because she was the qual sec for a little bit. And okay, I'm sorry. I'm just remembering as we go because I know she was because it had to do with my next post. I was on the FBO post, just doing it. And then LRH came back because she was put in qual before he came back. That's right. He didn't start that till after he came back from the States when he was on his sabbatical.
Is that when he went to New York, Janice?
Yeah.
LRH?
Yeah. And I didn't know until I got back to the ship that he wasn't there. But I found out something really weird when I got back about that. When I got back, he wasn't there, but I wrote him a daily report. I'd write a daily report saying I'm back and da-da-da. And I figured, we'd get to him. The next morning, I get an answer. Well, what the heck? How do I get an answer to something I sent to him last night? This is ridiculous, right? And I remembered something else very weird when I was in Europe. When I was in Denmark, I would write stuff up and I would get answers back in my in-basket from him, handwritten. And it's one of the things Franny had told me to do is send it to Messenger on duty, and they'll get it into him. Otherwise, it won't, to make sure it gets to him. Something like that. So then one day I'm in Europe and I get this one, I guess I didn't send it up right, but I get a letter back from LRH on the stationery, and he says, "Dear Goldie." Well, there's only one person on the ship that always called me Goldie, and that was Janice Guilford. Remember her?
Janet Guilford, yeah.
Janet Guilford. She was like the SO1. She was doing that, doing SO1 stuff. I was surprised. So when I got back and I go to Fran, she goes, "You don't know?" And I go, "What do you mean? What do you mean I don't know?" She says, "He doesn't answer those." Yes, Janet did. And no, and that's when I found out about the SO1 line.
The SO1 was the people who answered Hubbard's mail for him.
Right. Yeah. All letters.
It wasn't really him.
Will be answered by me. BS. Yeah. Everyone was. Yeah. And the only time he even saw those letters, from what I understand, is if some old timer came in and then they'd send it into him, so they'd make sure that he saw the response. But even the things weren't signed; they were stamped. Ron.
Right. But when he was on the ship, well, SO1 stood for Standing Order Number 1. Right. And when he was on the ship and he was well, the SO1 letters, Ken Urquhart would propose the answers, and they would be typed up by SO1 or by Ken's personal secretary. And then every day they went in a folder to Hubbard, and he would read the letter to himself and the proposed answer and sign them. And that was standard. That until then he left in 72. So he wasn't there in 72, the end of 72, and all of 73. So that was where Ken would be signing it, or Joyce Popham got really good at not just signing Ron, but she could sign L. Ron Hubbard, and it would look just like it. She was really good at that. And then when he came back in 73, again, the same procedure started again going to him. And it wasn't until we left the ship in 75 that he stopped seeing the SO1 letters.
Oh, okay. Because okay, cool. So he did see them. I thought he just saw ones of people he knew at that point.
No, he did see them. Yeah. Unless it was a little brief, nothing of importance. And then also the daily reports, like on the ship. Yeah. Everyone was encouraged to write a daily report, and there was a sequence to it. And those all went to the messengers. And as those came in, we would go through them and highlight what we thought was important that he should read. And then we would give those to him at the end of the night. And that was the last thing he would do before he'd go to bed, was he'd read the daily reports and answer them. Some he just would say thank you. Some he would say nothing. Some he would write on. Some we would have message runs on. And then we would file them. And or if he wrote something, we'd put a little tag on it telling them to note the answer and to return it to us. So we kept a copy of every daily report for years.
I kept all the ones myself. I didn't send any of them back. And when I left the ship, most of them I didn't get. But for some reason, when I was in Denver, they sent me some stuff and I had all these things in it. And later on, I sold them back to the church for $50 a pop. But they probably sold for $5,000 each,
Right.
I was out of the church and all, and oh my God, yeah, that's right, they were buying all those up. Anyway, so that's when I got back, I found out he wasn't there. That's me. That's what I was saying. When I got back at the ship, he wasn't there, and so it was just a matter of I just did what I did, kept doing it, and then he got back. And once he got back to the ship, what happened? Okay, I'm still on the post, and then somebody else in Treasury says, "Did you see this eval that LRH did? It's about." And I go, "No, I haven't had time to look at my in basket, which was like this, Well, I didn't look at all the things that came through." And so he says, "You better look at it. It was an eval that he just did on the whole finance office, and you're mentioned in it." And I go, "Okay." So I go look at this eval, and it's an eval on on the finance network, the FBO network.
Eval for the Neverends is an evaluation. Short for evaluation.
Right. And that's, of course, like you mentioned, daily reports. Those are a great source of information for him for everything that was going on in the ship. Very smart. But anyway, so I'm reading this thing and I'm just kind of blown away. He's going through just how all the problems, everything. It's a pretty good eval. And I get down to the targets, and the first target on the thing is appoint Mike Goldstein to FBO dictator to get the money. And that's it. And then it's like, and the target is to LRA. And then where you write your initials when you finish them. It's just already printed, done.
Yeah.
I'm going, what the hell is this? I don't know what this is. Nobody said anything to me, right? It's just on this eval. So so meanwhile, he tore the whole. Franny's all of a sudden busted. She's no longer an aide up there. She's coming down to the bureaus. So she's moving her whole office down. So I go in, go to her, and she's like, "Oh, frizz." I go, "What does this mean?" She goes, "Oh, you're still under me, Gold. Don't worry. Just do what you're doing." I go, "That's not right." So I go, I don't know what to do. So I go to Rebecca, who's the qualsec, and she says, "Okay, well, let's look at this. Let's work with, and we look up the word dictator. She has me look up dictator, which is someone appointed at a time of emergency, and I go, then that must be me and I don't have anybody. I'm just going to do it. So I just figured that's what he wanted me to do. So I just figured, how to get the money in. So I figured for the first time, I've got this power. I can do this. I don't have to worry about the Guardian's office finance. And they just brought a new AG to the ship to kind of, Herbie said her name was her name Ann Ersprung? Does that sound right?
Ann Burgess. She married Wally Burgess.
Okay, but it was Ersprung before it. She was.
I think right? You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was the AG. She came from Worldwide, and she was a tough lady. And she immediately started putting stuff, but she was in charge. So all of a sudden now, as this dictator, I'm figuring I can do whatever I want, right, to do this. So I just thought I would just start sending out these telexes to all the FBOs and the orgs. So I sent them out telexes saying, and I signed it, LRH. I signed it, FBO dictator, LRH appointed. And I sent these off saying, send this money immediately. So I started on these people, these FBOs, they didn't have to worry about the AGs there anymore. They could just do it. So all of a sudden, we started getting this money coming in. And we got a lot, all of a sudden, all these bucks come in. And then I see him somewhere. Then he catches me in the hall or something, and we start talking. And yeah, it all kind of worked out, and the income was coming in, and we're making a lot of money. And so I just figured, I can kind of do what I want, on the finance line. So there was a point there where I decided everybody that's helping in the Treasury office, the finance office here, everybody gets $100 bonus. Now we got $10 a week. So I figured I can do it. Everybody here gets a $100 bonus. And I just go ahead and go up to Hannah, who is AV, and she goes, sure, she signs it, and we do it and disperse the money. And the AG goes, this didn't go through FP. Everybody has to return them. This is, she writes up a whole thing, sends it. And right after her thing comes out, LRH sends a thing. Yes, this wasn't done on proper lines, but I would have given the money anyway. The AG's thing is canceled. They get to keep the money. So we all had like $100 bonuses, and he would take us out to dinner. So, that's where I got food poisoning, but it was nice. So during this time,
were you saying he took you out to dinner? You mean L. Ron Hubbard took you?
Yeah, in Madeira, I think it was. And we went to
he would go to a restaurant with you?
With us. I think so.
Oh, no kidding.
A restaurant, I think so. Because I got this maybe I'm trying to think. Because I got a little gift of an ashtray, this weird little ashtray, gave gifts out. Then we went around Madeira, and I think it was Wally. Was it Wally that was taking us?
Yeah, Wally.
And he would, and then he would, he would go just take us around to give us, buy us lunch or something. And then something I'd see some guy was peddling these wool sweaters. And I was looking at it to see if I want to get one for Rebecca, but it was too expensive. He says, "You want that?" And he just buys it. So it was like that. He was very generous on all that stuff.
Yeah, he would have had Wally, the PRs, the public relations. He would have had them take them to dinner and then take them, around as a Liberty type of thing.
Yeah,
he did that. He did that for us later. He'd send us to, the Bee Gees rock concert or to different theater shows, Camelot and that type of thing. He did that a lot for recognition of good stats.
Yeah, and it was nice. It was nice. And so at that point, it was just, and as the thing was coming in, I just figured I would, I wanted to give him a bonus, right? I just got this idea. And he made, what I paid him from the Sea Org was $316 and change every week. That was his check. That was what he got from $316.42, something like that.
Yeah.
And so I we're pulling in a lot of money. I think I pulled in about $1 million. It was a lot from the orgs. And so I just figured, okay, I'm going to give him a bonus. So I cut out in Swiss francs, $10,000 in Swiss francs. And I go upstairs and I catch him coming out of his, the dining room. And I tell him, okay, thank you. I'm going to give you your bonus for the week. And I hand him the cash, right? And then Vicky Palomini's out there too. And he even says, no, don't give this to her. This is mine. He stuffs it in his back pocket and takes off, like that. And I think I gave him a couple of bonuses like that. I was doing that. And
Would he thank you, or was he surprised?
Oh yeah. Of course he did. And then of course everybody else wanted to get in on it. So what we did is we gave him a one of those thing with L. Ron Hubbard on, was solid gold bar that sat on his had it done. Do you remember it, Janice?
I remember that.
About this big. Yeah. And it said L. Ron Hubbard was carved into this solid gold bar. It was like a triangle, and it's to sit on, like a desk.
Yeah. Like a nameplate on the desk?
Yeah, yes. Like a thing on the desk. It was like triangular, so it sat on the desk and had his name on it. It was solid gold. God, how much that would be worth? Oh my God.
Now I have a question. You're getting all this money from the orgs. How were the orgs doing?
How were they doing at that time?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I do not remember. I do not have a clue.
Except I will say this: it was the early 1970s. It was the early 1970s, and I was just getting into Scientology in Washington D.C., and we were rolling. You know what I mean? Dave Richards was the executive director. I was just a public, but they were tons of people in doing the concourse and this and that. I'm sure it was like that in New York and other places too. So I'm sure. I mean, they were doing a lot better than they are today. That's for sure.
I heard they don't even have the concourse anymore.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, really? This is 73. This was 1973.
Yeah, that's when I got in Scientology. I was 14.
I'm sure they were doing well. I mean, it wasn't anything that I had to do with, so my attention was just on. I don't remember anything other than that, but I'm sure they were if they could afford to send it to us. And
and the staff. I just remember too. I mean, the staff weren't making a lot of money in the DC org, but that was the Bill Franks and Jeannie Franks, and they all came to the org, and DC org was one of the biggest orgs. And Janice, of course, you came on mission around that time too.
I put Bill Franks on post.
Yeah, and DC was booming at that time, and the staff, some of them moonlight, but you either were a Dare Foundation staff member, and some of them had other jobs, but they all seemed to live together close to the org, no problems, But again, it's not like it is today. I mean, they're completely empty. Nobody makes any money, so.
Yeah, but they probably have big buildings, but nobody in them.
Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah,
things, but they were filled. I remember the New York org when I was coming to fly, how big it was, how many people were on course there.
And this was before the price increases that didn't start till when 75, 76
later. Right? I don't know, because I remember when I was first in the org, intensives it was $625 for an intensive. It's $50 an hour.
No, you're right, Mike, and you're right, because I was public and I was under I was under 18, so they gave me a discount. I paid $500 at an incentive, so I got $125 discount. I paid for all my grades auditing, working in the summer, and then getting my auditing in the winter. So by the time I graduated high school, I was a grade 4 completion. But again, it was $500 for 12 and a half hours of intensive. And I thought that was a good deal, you know?
Yeah. 625 wasn't bad.
No, that was good too. Yeah.
Wasn't
Hey,
bad.
let me ask you a question. Do you have an idea? You won't remember exactly, but in ballpark, how much you guys had in reserves in those days that you were monitoring?
God, I'm trying to remember. I don't think it was more than 10 million.
Okay.
I really don't. I don't think
and
so.
You had $1 million on the ship. You had $1 million on the ship.
$1 million in cash, and then I had whatever in those other accounts. But I think the whole thing, including what was in Luxembourg and Switzerland, I don't think it was more than 10 million. I'm trying to remember
which today would be the equivalent of almost $100 million. But
it was,
right?
But compared to what they got later on, when they,
because when we left the Sea Org in 1990, I think Sea Org reserves was like $360 million. This is 1990, right. And of course now it's billions of dollars. But anyway,
maybe it was more than 10, but I don't remember.
Well, no, but then the price increases happened, and then we had the knots boom and all that. So there was a lot of money that was made later on.
Yeah, but you got to also remember all that money was for paid services. It was not donation money.
No donations.
No,
you had
zero.
You got that money in. You had to deliver those services to make that money good.
Right.
Yeah. And then didn't you say, was it you, Mike, that said that you couldn't take the money out unless you delivered the services? Like you couldn't spend it.
That was mission policy.
Mission policy. Okay.
That's how
that was something that's right. You said the missions.
That's how they,
and that's why they were more solvent. They were more solvent than the orgs were because of that.
And that's how that was a great cache of money for Miscavige when that was it. One of the three places, right? So that was so now I'm on this dictator post. I'm also at the same time handling all the FBO posts, the reserves chief, all of that stuff. And so I'm completely swamped. I'm just, completely overwhelmed, just doing all this stuff. And so I figure, I just got to somehow be able to keep my head above water and keep everything running. And then the weird stuff starts happening. I get a message. Messenger comes down, and she says, Commodore
was it Janice? Was it Janice?
No, it probably wasn't. But I don't remember. But she says, Commodore wants to know, what's the definition of photography? What? What do you mean? And I'm taking nice pictures. I'm running around and she's following me and I'm trying to get stuff done. And so she goes off and she comes back. Commodore says, flunk, try again. All right. Taking really nice pictures. I don't know. And it's so stupid to me that he's asking me these questions. And so she comes down, flunk again. What's the definition? And I'm going, and I said, listen, and I start talking to her, and she says, so what does he want? She says, I can't tell you that. Just give me a hint. Give me a hint. So I get some hints out of her till I get a definition, and I give it back to her, and I don't hear again. Right? That's it. She's gone. And then later on, I go up the stairs, and I'm up there, and he comes out of his research. He says, what do you mean getting my messengers to give you answers to my questions? How dare, like that. And I go, and then he laughs. He says, I got your number or something like that, and walks away. So then I keep getting these stupid messages about stuff that has nothing to do with my post, right? And so, and it's just what do they call Dev T? From him, that was it. It was just like, why are you doing this? And then Messenger says, Commodore wants you to get on the PR course, PRO course, right?
Public Relations Officer.
Yeah, or something like that. I got to be on this course, and I'm going. And I'm already like auditing on a solo auditing. I'm already doing some other thing, some other damn course. And so it's like, okay, tell him okay. He says, no, you don't understand. He wants you to do it now. Now he says, yeah, he's down waiting for you. What? So I go down those stairs to the course room, and I go down the stairs, and he's right there, and he's taking pictures of me, and he's taking pictures. As I'm walking down the stairs, okay, come on down, and Joan Robertson is supervising. Is supervising thing right now. He said, okay, Joni, come over. Let's make sure he gets on right. So he's taking these pictures to make sure that I get on and route on. And once she puts me on the course, then he goes. And I'm on this course down the pier. And I can't figure out why is all this stuff? Why is he doing all this stuff? Meanwhile, I'm just trying to get everything done. And as the thing's winding down, everything's kind of with the dictator post is starting to go. And I figure I got to start turning over these other finance posts. Her name was Marie. She was an FBO from like New York or something in training, and she was there in the finance office. I think she was doing some kind of internship, and somehow I got okayed. I turned over the FBO post to her, and then I turned over the reserves chief. This was a good move to Pat Broeker. That was a great move on my anyway.
So, reserves chief. I've got a story on that.
That's how he got his hands on the reserves. So I turned over that. So I get these things turned over, and I get that all going, and then I figure, look, dictators there at a time of emergency, so there's no more emergency, and I'm going to end the post. I just figured I'm going to end it. So I just stop, and I send a thing up to LRH going, well. And I tell him, I says, I've turned over these posts, and I've terminated the dictator post. It's not necessary anymore, and because Franny's handling all that, so I'm done. What do you want me to do now? So he sends back a written on. It says, listen to tape, Upstat. What tape? So I get this tape, and it's like an hour long hat write up, and he's giving it to Laurel Watson, she's now in charge of she's now the PRO or whatever. Right? Yeah.
LRHPR.
LRH PRO, right.
Janice, your microphone, the volume is very low.
Yeah. At that time, I think the people in the office I think Wally was there, but Laurel was the head of it. And then the guy was Barry Watson, him too. So those are the guys that were in the PRO office. And so anyway, I listened.
So is that why he wanted you to do the PRO course?
That's right. He wanted me to be in this PRO office. I figured.
Oh.
I mean, and he gives me his hat write up. Supposedly he's turning over a hat to me of his, and it's a marketing hat, and he calls it it's called the LRH Properties Chief. And properties are any of his tapes or book, all of his, anything that he wrote, it's all he considered properties. And my job is to exploit them, which is to get them, get them out there, really
get them sold, get them sold, get them looked at,
whatever.
It's almost like the precursor to Author Services Incorporated, which was his for-profit corporation that was set up in '82,
right,
to handle all of his royalties and all that stuff, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, but the original tape and the way he put it out and the way I understood it at the time, it was a marketing hat of Scientology, because that's the way I figured it. And at the time I'm going, why did he put me under them, under Ken and Laurel? I couldn't understand, because I'd worked so well just between me and him, just me doing it with him on the dictator post. So why does he? I couldn't understand, why is this in the PRO office? It just didn't make any sense to me. But I figure, I guess he knows what he's doing. So I listened to this tape, and I'm really kind of I don't know how to put it. I mean, I'm totally confused, because I'm listening to this tape, and this is supposed to be, as far as I know, a marketing tape, marketing Scientology. Yet every single target on that tape, and because it was a list of all these ideas and things that, of course, Laurel wrote up in a program of targets. This is what you have. But I'm listening to this thing, and all but one of his ideas are how to get more money out of people already on lines. And I just, in other words, put together a course for if these people are in between their OT levels. So and they're not doing anything. Let's come up with a course that on the Philadelphia Doctor tapes, and put this course together to sell them. And everything on there were all these ideas of how to, sell more crap to people that are already on lines. And there was only one thing on there that had anything to do with a grassroots movement, which to me was the whole purpose. Should have been, right? And this was something, this new idea that he had, that he got in the States, and this is the first time he's talking about it. He called it the Volunteer Ministers Program. Okay, this is his big idea. And the original this from that tape was not like what the Volunteer Ministers Program would be, because what it ended up becoming is just another thing in Div 6, another bunch of services to sell people, right? But originally it was supposed to be a grassroots movement where the volunteer minister was not part of the org, didn't have anything to do with the org. He was outside of it. And he only was directed by someone at Flag, somebody that would be somebody under me that I'd put there, something like that. And he had no connection with the org except to maybe go in and get checked out on a book that we had to put together called the Volunteer Minister's Handbook. And that's the only thing that this guy ever had was this book. That was his Bible. And he would go and go to church and lecture and talk about it. And that was to get that grassroots movement out there. And he even had this whole hierarchy of these weird, like even a cardinal. You know who the cardinal was supposed to be? Bob Harvey, of all people, right? Later on.
That's right.
So is that what eventually became the book, the Volunteer Minister's Handbook?
No, part of my orders was I had to put together 2 books. One of them was the Volunteer Minister's Handbook, and the other one was a book about all the updates on Dianetics after book 1. Something.
Was that Dianetics Today?
That's an interesting story. Yes, that's what it became. That was a nightmare. Anyway, so I had to, work with them to put these books together, and then anyway, I'll get to that. But the Volunteer Ministers Program, the whole point was this grassroots movement. And I'm reading this; it's the silliest thing you ever wrote. I mean, cardinals and deacons. What is all this for? He had this idea from being in the States that people are going back to religion. So we're going to, how he figured this out from living in an apartment somewhere in New York.
In Queens,
anyway,
yeah.
Whatever. So it just, I'm listening to this tape, and of course I'm getting from my seniors, the 2 of them, you got to get going, let's go with this. And I am just, I'm just thinking this is the stupidest thing I've ever, how can I do this, right? And it was hard for me at the time because, what had happened in the meantime during this whole thing is he had the Programs Bureau, he put the Programs Bureau together, and everybody ended up in the RPF, including Rebecca. So now she's in the RPF. We had a falling out, so I'm having this problems where I can't even communicate, hard to even get with her. And that's gone my mind. And then plus I'm trying to figure out how do I do a post that I think is completely ridiculous. It's just wrong. And what I should have done later on in hindsight is I probably just should have said, look, I can't do this for these reasons. I should have but I couldn't do it. I don't know. I just at the time, and I was getting, by my seniors, pushing me, all this kind of thing. So what I just ended up doing was I just figured I'm going to do what I want to do. I didn't ask. And I thought at the time, the only thing that makes sense to me to do is something with book 1, because doesn't he always say how it's important to sell that book? Blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to do this. I just decided that's what we have to do, not all this garbage. So I went down to Sandra, who was still Sandra Johnson. Sandra. She was the pubs in charge of pubs at the time. So right. I talked to her about it. I was working with, and I think it was Carrie who was in charge of Pioneer area at the time, which was outreaches. So I went down with Carrie and her, and I started going, and I said, this is what we want to do. I started putting this whole thing together because I was going to propose it to her. That's what I figured I'd do. I'd get it all together before because I can't just say, I think what you're doing is crap, and this is what we should be doing. If you want to get people, if you want to do a marketing program, let's get new people, grassroots. But what you have there is really silly, Nobody wants to do that. So even though we put together the book, and at that point it was just I went down to them. I put this program together, and I also figured out what we had to do is really advertise, not this kind of advertising, but go to somebody like, no real advertising, like Madison Avenue. Go to these people that know how to advertise and get the book. I said, look, I just made all this money. Why don't we take $1 million and go down and advertise it and really do something, And so I send this up, and it doesn't make it up to him. And I'm called into the office by, I don't remember, it wasn't Laura, but it was Ken. I remember him sitting in Ken's office, and he's going through this thing, and he's going, what's wrong with volume 6? What are you talking about? He says, this is, you want to go, these guys, what do they know about promotion? So LRH put it all in here. It's in volumes. I go, no, what are you talking about? There's nothing in there about this kind of advertising. Doesn't have anything to do with it. We're talking about something he's never done. So he basically says, okay. And what goes up to LRH is that Mike Goldstein wants to spend $1 million of SEAL reserves. That was the only story. And it was just, the whole thing was it just got worse and worse and worse. And
did you get removed, or did something discipline?
I mean, it was just like thing after thing. Like you mentioned the book Dynex today. One of the things, didn't have a name for it. So I had to survey the name for that book. And the way we'd survey, because what are you going to do there on the ship? You send out the surveys to the follows, and then they go out and survey it on the streets.
In each continent, yeah.
Yeah. So I put together a survey thing for the book, and I send it out to them, and I get back the results, and it's Dianetics Today. So I send this up, and Urquhart sends it back, says, we can't use this name. It's a degradation of Dianetics. It degrades the Dianetics. You must have missurveyed this. You must, you go survey it again. Okay. So I surveyed again, Dianetics Today. Next thing, you don't know what you're doing. Go to cramming. So he sends me to cramming. And it wasn't Robin Lindsay, wasn't the cramming. It was some woman. I don't remember who it was, but she was tough, real tough cramming, toughest cramming. To the where you go in there and you start arguing, yeah, just do it, that kind of thing. So I go through the whole P and I check out whether the whole thing. Okay, you got it, great. Then I survey again, Dianetics Today. Now he says, nope, you still don't have it. Now I got to go back to all the original tapes that the policies were taken from, the lectures. LRH would give a lecture and then they'd pull out of it and put it in a policy for the PR series. So then I had to go listen to all the original tapes to make sure I did all that, check that. Finally, the cramming, I was going, I don't know what to do. I know you understand. I don't know what else to do. I send it out again. He doesn't approve it. It wasn't until I got back to the States and was in and starting the org that the book came out, and I guess what the name is.
Dianetics Today.
Now I want to discuss a couple things you talked about.
But
but you're talking about a lot of things you were explaining I didn't know about, you know what I mean? But Janice, this must have been after he came back from New York. Didn't he then, want to increase his PR, and then he came up with the whole PR missions where he had PR officers and all that, source missions. But then also, like, do you remember the Rosicrucians campaign in the late 70s, which was the Rosicrucians were some religious thing that used to run little ads or something in the papers. And so we were supposed to do the same thing for Dianetics. Like, it was almost like he went to the States and he thought, well, we need to be bigger. And he's trying to come up with ideas of how to become bigger. Is that kind of how it fits with you, Janice?
Yeah, he got heavy onto marketing at that point. He started his photo shoots, which was for the Volunteer Minister's Handbook and for services. And then he took on all the org mags being done at the ship. And then we got a big printing press that would print out all the org mags and ship them out, and the flyers and the addresso system. I mean, it all started being done down in Lower Hold number 2.
Yeah. And Mike, I took from what you're telling me that when he sent you the thing, listen to this tape, Upstat. An Upstat means that you're like power terminal. You're like a great terminal. Like, to him, it seems like he felt like he was promoting you from your finance dictator thing, because he thought he trusted you enough to be in charge of public relations for him. You know what I mean? In these different projects. That's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, it's just his idea of doing it was really screwy. I'm sorry, and I
Yeah.
and I,
Well, then the other thing,
I didn't.
well, we're discussing this, right? Okay. Cause I'm talking about what happened years later, because then Author Services was set up, separate corporation. When they did the corporations for Scientology, they separated his personal from the church because the IRS was after him and stuff like that. So then their job, and Fran Broeker, she was one of the main people involved with it, was selling and promoting his works and then getting the money from those for his reserves. You know what I mean? But it was like it was. He didn't feel like his works were being properly promoted and advertised to get people out. Like, I'll give you an example. You mentioned the Philadelphia Doctor course. That was a big deal. In Scientology, where they would sell that to people to give them more OT training. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't so much to make money. It was just that we've got this thing, we need to promote it to people. I mean, that's how it eventually came out. Do you know what I mean? In terms of like something else that you could sell and also, would enhance somebody's OT abilities.
Yeah. Well, I think he had that. Mainly his thing too was, you just want to keep them busy, keep them going. But the truth of the matter is every program was selling something to somebody that was already online.
Yeah.
Right.
That was it. And I know that was, and maybe that
except
was
the volunteer ministers. I remember when that handbook that didn't come out, but that didn't come out till like 78 or 76, I think it came out when you guys were in Clearwater. Because I remember buying it as a public, and I actually liked it because it had little checklists, and it was kind of like a training hat for somebody who was a Scientologist to be a good Scientologist and get people. Anyway, I didn't think there was something.
Just that it became just another thing to deliver in Div 6. It didn't become what the original thing where you had these people out there. And I didn't actually figure out the whole thing till much later. But at that time, it was just anyway.
But Mike, you were on the right track with the book one, Dianetics, because that became the main feeder line again in the 1980s.
Well, that's
what I mean. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was later on. I didn't do that.
No, but you were on the right track. I
just hadn't put it together until 1980. Right. I didn't put it all together until 80. That's another story. But at this time,
that's funny though, because I always wanted that Dianetics Today book. As soon as you mentioned that, I went, "Oh yeah, Dianetics Today." I had forgotten about that book. First time I thought about it in probably 50 years.
That was incredible. So anyway, It was kind of a crazy period for me, because it was like, he'd catch me in the hall and about the volunteers and say, they need this like the desert needs rain, it's this big thing and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just sitting there. I didn't know how to tell.
What did you just say? What did you just say?
That's what he would say to me. He would say, they need that like the desert needs rain. That was.
I get it. Okay.
That's what he said about the bomb. And I go, no, they don't. They need something, but not this, And anyway, it got to the point where I was just almost in apathy about the whole thing. And finally, it was like so I'm outside of his research room once, and he asked me something about it. And by now, I'm just going, I don't know. He goes, he doesn't know, and then just gives me the look and walks away. And that was like, Laurel was there, so that was a perfect time. RPF, just go to the RPF.
Let me ask you one other question. You kept saying that you were submitting this thing to Ken Urquhart, right? Was Hubbard actually seeing what was going to Urquhart, or was it not reaching Hubbard at all? So it was just Ken Urquhart's understanding of what LRH wanted, right?
Of them, Laurel and Ken.
Yeah, it was them covering their ass. They were covering their ass, saying, they were covering their ass because they were going like, oh, this doesn't follow the PR series. Whereas Hubbard may have seen what you were proposing and gone like, that's a great idea.
Right.
Maybe. But they were just doing what they knew to do. They were just.
No, I know. I understand. I'm just.
You're right. And it's like I said, if it was a few years later, I wouldn't have been that way. I would have gone into it. Yeah, but at that time,
you mentioned something that I'm sure a lot of Sea Org members, including myself, would be frustrated when you would submit something and a senior would stop it. But it was a great idea, and you'd submit it and they'd stop it. And then the next thing you know, the senior of that senior would ask you, what are you doing on this? And you tell them about it. around the senior's back, and they go like, that's a great idea. We should do that. You know what I mean? That happened in Scientology all the time.
Well, that's why Hubbard set up the daily report line, because it skipped everybody.
Yeah.
And it was just that crew member to Hubbard with the messenger highlighting what they thought was important. And even times we didn't highlight things, Hubbard would catch something that we didn't highlight and do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it became that way in the Sea Org. I don't know what it's like in the real world, but it became like all these filters were there to try and keep things away from the person who ultimately was going to make the decision. And it would frustrate like designers and marketers and all sorts of different people, because they'd have these ideas and they wouldn't be able to get them. Yes, Janice.
And that's because per one of the greatest Scientology abbreviations, it would be DevT.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they considered it DevT, but not necessarily. Yeah. They were trying to, filter things out that maybe he would have liked,
Right. Just so everyone knows, DevT is developed traffic. And there were even stamps made up where you would just stamp something that was DevT.
You're wasting time. You're wasting time.
It just became crazy. But the basic concept, is very rational. Stuff that has nothing. Yeah. I could have, I should have said to him, this is all DevT to me.
Well, this is a good point to end now, Mike, with you going to the RPF, and we're going to pick it up because these are some great stories. I've enjoyed talking about, you're reminding me of stuff that I haven't thought about in years. And Janice, I'm sure it's the same with you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't thought of some of this stuff since I wrote my books.
Ask about the PR capers next time before I go to the RPF.
We will. We'll go over those. Anyway, we want to thank everybody for watching. Please subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button. Hit the notification button so you know when we do another one of these videos. And it's like Janice likes to rock slam that like button. Please do so. And if you have any questions or comments about what we talked about, go down there. We read all of them from the previous shows, and we try and answer them in the next show. So we appreciate any comments and feedback. And if you'd like to support the channel, buy us a coffee. Go down into the description, click on it, send us $5, $2, $1, whatever. It all goes towards us doing more videos, and we appreciate any support from our loyal viewers and our members of our channel. Mike and Janice, is there anything you guys would like to say until we do the next show?
Mike, I'm loving this. This is great. You got a great memory of the different things, so it's really good talking with you.
I agree.
Thank you. I'm enjoying talking with you guys. Like I mentioned to you before, it's just like talking to old friends. It's not like doing some kind of what we're really doing. It's just, I'm just talking to you guys. That's all.
Right.
No, it's great. Right. It's great. Okay, everybody. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.